What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to HBTV, the show, the second season. This is the first episode. We're jumping off with Rosylyn Rhee. I'm going to have her on the Zoom in just a second. And again, thank you. Thank you for your time, your eyes and ears. If you are a returning viewer, thank you for your time. And if this is your first time, please like, subscribe, and hit that little bell on the YouTube channel, and also visit harrybulgariantv.me. You can follow me on Instagram at harry.bulgarian_TV. Check out the latest posts and upcoming events and shows and things like that. So again, very blessed. Couldn't have done this second season without any of you guys. Thank you for the love and thank you for that support. I had a great season for that first time, and the second season is going to even be better. Got a lot of new guests with inspiring stories, and I can't wait to sit down with them via Zoom and have you guys tune in as well. So I know you guys have a lot of things on your schedule, and I do appreciate the time that you guys have with me today and my special guest. So I'm going to go ahead and set up our guest on Zoom. So I'll be right back, and please stay tuned. All right, our next guest, our special guest today on this program is Rosylyn Rhee. She's a documentary filmmaker. She's been doing this for many years, and I just wanted to hear her journey, her story, the ins and outs of being a filmmaker and things and such like that. So let me go ahead and bring her in on the Zoom in 1 second, please. Rosylyn, can you hear me? Oh, let's check that volume on your microphone. Go ahead and talk again, please. Yeah, that microphone is just a little bit low. I don't know if you can switch to the microphone on the bottom left, maybe to your computer or to your sound card.
How's this?
That's a little bit better.
Oh, okay. How about this?
Much better.
Much better.
There it is. There it is. Now I can totally
All right,
hear
you
you.
can hear me loud and clear.
I can hear you loud and clear. That's awesome. So, Rosylyn, thank you for your time. This is the first time actually having that chance to talk with you, and obviously our viewers out there to check you out. So do me a favor and give me that 30-second elevator speech of who Rosylyn Rhee is and what do you do.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's really great to see you and to everybody on here. Thanks for joining us. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I've been doing this since the fall of 1996, so for a long time. And I think there's two main parts to my work. There's work where I get commissioned and get paid to do documentaries, and then I also have work that are passion projects. But that's not to say that my commission work is not. I don't feel passionate about it. I feel very honored to be commissioned to do documentary work. So for about, I lived in LA for 17 years. Mm-hmm. And about 10 of those years, my main bread and butter was making mini documentaries for nonprofits.
Oh, awesome.
And I moved on from there.
That's great. All right, so Rosylyn, do me a favor. Take us back, pre-1996, since you've been doing this. Like, take us back. What was that like for you as far as, like, getting into just filming something? And what was inspiring you at that point? I don't know if you had like a Polaroid, if you had like, a Panasonic video recorder, like what was your technology back then? And, what was going on with you during that time?
Yeah, that's a good way to stage it. Thank you. The technology at the time. So I'm 43 And I picked up my first camera. It was an actual film camera in 7th grade. And I don't know if they still teach this in 7th grade. Do you guys still have industrial arts and home ec?
No, but they do have.
This is a long time ago.
No, I know. I mean, I was taking typing in junior high.
Right.
It used to be called junior high. Now it's like middle school or something. But yeah, I think they do stuff with iMovie and Adobe Suite. So it's, something like that. But yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, so I had an industrial arts teacher, and we did things. We learned like how to use band saws and all this stuff and make woodworking projects. And I think I was just like a hyper kid and always just hanging around the wood shop. And he just gave me one of his cameras and was like, here, just, I think probably to get out of his hair, but he said, here. And then he taught me how to use it. And it was, an old school camera. Like in order to focus it, you had 2 orange circles and you had to align them to make a single circle.
Wow.
That was how old school it was. And then you go into a dark room, you take out the film, you develop it, and then you have the negatives, and then you take the negatives into a machine, and then you make a print, and you develop the prints. And I still remember that very first time I developed my first print, and it was a picture of these 2 kids from the back in science class. And I just thought, this is the most amazing thing that like I can capture this. And nothing held my attention like taking pictures, but I didn't know then at the time that I was an artist or I was a photographer. I just knew that I loved, capturing life. So I went into high school. I think there were 2 photography classes. I took them, and then there were no more photography classes. So I went to the community college and took another photography class, and my parents were like, okay, you can take this photography class if you promise not to go into it as a career. And I was like, sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then that of course didn't happen. And then I got into college, and then my path took a different turn. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah,
now?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay, sure. So I did my undergrad at Harvard, and I didn't know this, but they actually have a very strong documentary filmmaking program. I don't think that their narrative filmmaking program was as developed, but it was kind of this random thing that they had a great documentary filmmaking program. And when I entered as a freshman, I was pretty freaked out. I was really overwhelmed because, I went to a public school in Centerville, Ohio.
Okay.
So there's, there at the time, it's, I haven't been back to my school in a while, but when I went to high school, there was a farm beside my high school with a pony, and then to go be dropped into Harvard was like totally overwhelming, really intimidating. Most of my classmates had gone to prep schools and on the East Coast, and they knew what that environment would be like. So for me, I just felt completely like in over my head. And you have to declare your major at the end of your freshman year. And I really had no idea. I was like, folklore and mythology, ancient Indian languages and Sanskrit, I had no idea because I was just so overwhelmed. And I had an amazing freshman RA. His name is Noah. And I have to thank him for this because he knew that I love photography. And he said, well, why don't you, go check out this really cool photography class. And I was like, okay. And I checked it out and I loved it. And I thought, okay, well, this is my major. And I ended up choosing documentary filmmaking. And this is not for noble reasons why I really chose it. It was, something that is amazing about Harvard is their resources are unparalleled, right? It's just kind of mind blowing. So if you study film, because at the time, back in the late 1990s, I learned documentary filmmaking on 16 millimeter film.
Right.
If you can believe it. So that's really expensive, and Harvard pays for all of that. So they, in order to shoot like 11 minutes, just 11 minutes, it's like a 400-foot reel of film. In order to purchase that film and then develop it, and print it, that's $250, right? $250 just for 11 minutes. And so, that's inconceivable as an undergrad. But if the university's paying for all of that, well, then, you really can learn the craft. So my original rationale for choosing documentary filmmaking is I was like, this is a better deal financially than photography. I'll get more for my money. So that's really why I chose it. But then when I started doing it, something just clicked, and it was like, when I started taking the classes, it was like this language that I heard. When I would see films and my professors would talk to me about it, it was like, oh, I understand what they're saying. And it was such a strong feeling, I just kept sticking with it.
Again, you're watching Hbtv, the show with your host, Harry Bugarin, and my special guest today, Rosylyn Rhee. And we're just talking about documentary filmmaking. You brought up the film portion of that technology and the mediums that you're using back then, and I didn't know it was that expensive for you guys to do that back then. So everybody now using Adobe and Premiere and all that good stuff, everything's done on your computer. You just don't know the struggles of 1990s
filmmaking. I was talking to an amazing resource at Film Independent, Lisa Haskell, and she is one of the artist development, I think, directors. And she was saying, well, nobody, documentary filmmakers don't make money from what they do. And I said, well, it is so much easier now to make documentaries than it was back in the 1990s. Because when I started, my professors were basically like, yep, there is no future. So you better really love it if you do it. Because, that if I told people that I made documentaries, they'd say, oh, like those PBS Safari documentaries.
Right,
and I'd be like, kind of. So it was not even really known what documentary filmmakers did, and that made it, going into it, even that much more terrifying. So the fact that there's this collective knowledge of understanding what documentary filmmakers do, how much work it is, how hard it is, how hard it is to edit all that footage. I love the democratization of the technology, the fact that everybody can make a documentary, that everybody has access to it. But nowadays, nowadays, right. But there's also a greater awareness now of how hard it is, that it's hard to edit all that footage. Because when I first started as a freelancer, I'd have clients come up to me and say, so can you film this 7-day festival every day and then edit us a video for $250?
Wow. Wow.
So now I don't even have to have that conversation, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, take me back to that. I don't know if you did your first commissioned documentary. I think you said it with the nonprofits during college, but take us through that. Like, how was that like? What was going on, and how did you manage that whole thing?
Yeah. So I can talk briefly about the films I made in college, and then segueing into nonprofit stuff. So I still was pretty freaked out that I had chosen this path. And I think the spring semester of my junior year, I actually took a year off because I was so overwhelmed just about being where I was at, doing what I was doing, and really having no guidance, because my family came from the more Korean old school belief of, the only career paths are being a doctor or a lawyer. So being an artist, being a documentary filmmaker, which nobody even knew at the time, was like they were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I took a year off just to kind of really just take a moment to breathe. So I actually, any parents out there of a child in college, if your kid says, they want to take a year off, trust them that it may be the best thing that they can do. And I'm very grateful that I took that year off. And then when I came back, I was just much more focused and grounded in what I wanted to do. And the first documentary I made, it was the second half of my second year of documentary filmmaking. And I decided to I had a photography teacher who said, "What are you obsessed with?" And side note, I think that if anybody's interested in going into filmmaking, photography classes are a really great, like basic vocabulary language to give you the vocabulary of cinema. So I recommend that for anybody if you want to get into filmmaking, take some photography classes.
Okay.
So I was thinking about what I was obsessed with, and I realized it was my mom. So this is, my mom passed away when I was very young, and she passed away right before I turned 7, and she had committed suicide, which is, it was something that none of our family members ever talked about, but it was still very much in our house. So because there was all this pain and shame around suicide and mental health, it's just something that was never talked about. But, she was so young when I passed away, and I really had such this desire to try and understand what happened. And so I have 3 older sisters, and of course, you're bonded by this traumatic event, but you're not talking about it. So I made a documentary about our mother through the eyes and perspective of my 3 older sisters. So I interviewed each of them, and they each have a very different perspective of our mom and how it shaped them. And I remember this. I remember this so clearly because at the time, understandably, they're like, "Why are you asking us questions about this?" And which is fair, And I was like, "I don't know. I feel like I have to do this, and I'm just doing it." And then the process of listening to their voices and piecing together the story of our mom, and I remember. My 2 eldest sisters and my eldest sister's husband came to Boston to see a rough cut, a work in progress of the film. And it was on a Steenbeck. A Steenbeck is an old school style of cutting film. It's literally like you rewind it, you fast forward it, you cut it with a knife, you paste it together with tape. I mean, it is old school.
Wow.
So I had cuts from the razors where you cut the film. So I remember.
Do they still use that technology today?
They may. They may. And I'll come back to the Omari thing, but very, very quick. I think there is some benefit to learning that old school way, because when you're limited to 11 minutes and you have to do so much labor just to cut it, it makes you be much more deliberate in advance.
Sure.
Of what you're doing. So, but in terms of Omari, so I was at the Steenbeck with my 2 eldest sisters and my eldest sister's husband, and they watched the work in progress of Omari, and then they just started weeping. And I remember, I'm getting emotional, but I remember this because it was just, I couldn't articulate what was going on in our home, but this is the way I could. And I think it was just this feeling of relief of like, I'm not the only one living with this pain. And I think they realized that we were all living with this. And that was just like an amazing moment of healing for my family. And at that moment, my sisters were like, "We get it. This is what you were meant to do. We get it."
Right. Sorry about your loss and about that. But definitely, I would love to check out that documentary. Is it somewhere we can actually see it? Is it
this is a good question. And so I do have copies of Omari and Same but Different on DVD.
I see.
Yeah, they're gonna go flying off the shelves now. So
as long as you didn't say Betamax. If you said Betamax, I think there'll be crickets. But DVDs, I think people can still use them.
It's still. But I also have been very strict about putting either of those films online because they're such personal and vulnerable films,
right?
Especially for my family. So for Omari, I sometimes give copies to friends, and oftentimes universities will buy a copy. And then that's how a lot of ways that the work gets out. But if people want to buy a DVD copy, I can
For sure. Well, definitely put that in the description at the end for our video. And again, you're watching Hbtv, the show, second season, first episode of the second season with my special guest, Rosylyn Rhee, documentary filmmaker. So thank you for that as far as the origins of your first projects and what was going on with you. So take me through the journey, from that point,
Sure.
going on to other projects. What did you do? And
the next, okay, yeah. So the next film is an important part of that journey. The first film, Omari, I was really overwhelmed. It was very successful at a young age, and it was in a lot of festivals. It showed at PBS. So again, it was just, I think I was like 21, and I didn't even really, at that point, I had not even owned my identity as an artist. So that it just, I kind of didn't know what to do with it. And then I had my senior, the thesis film, and then what to do after that. So when I graduated from college, I was awarded the Gardner Fellowship, which was, again, an incredible resource and amazing opportunity. Basically, so they give you money and they're like, okay, we want you to go abroad and have an experience. That was it. They're like, okay, it was just this recognition that after college is this kind of crazy time of uncertainty and unknown, and they award the fellowship to people they think could benefit from going abroad and having an experience, some sort of artistic experience. And you didn't have to make something from it, but you could. So at the time, I should back up. This is actually important. So I forgot about this. This is kind of huge. So I'd made that film, but my dad, whom I love very much,
mm-hmm.
he, my three older sisters are doctors, and I was clearly bad at science. And so I was like, clearly Rosylyn's not going to be a doctor. Lawyer. You are going to be a lawyer. So he had that path carved out for me, especially because how Korean parents can get about, especially Harvard, and, I'd gotten in, and he was like, that's it. Okay. After you graduate from Harvard, you're going to go to medical school, then you're
mm-hmm.
going to go to law school, and then you're going to be an Oxford scholar. No, I'm serious. This was it.
Wow.
An Oxford scholar, and then you're going to teach at Harvard, and then you're going to become the first Asian American Supreme Court justice. And
he set the bar low for you, didn't he?
No, right? And it was like dead serious. Like, wow. This is what you will do. And I was like, And that conversation of having to tell him, like, I'm not taking the LSATs because I'm an artist was, my dad is a very chill Asian man. He just very even keeled. And that was like the most angry, not even that I wasn't going to become the first Asian American Supreme Court justice, but then to not even go to law school at the bare minimum. He was like, well, at the bare minimum, go to law school. Right. And I was like, no. And then the, insult to injury to be like, I'm an artist. That was just, he was, so for the next 2 years, he didn't talk to me. Just completely just shut out. I did not exist. I think, one time I had come home to Dayton because I just wanted to see my family, and my dad had, called home, I think, to speak to my stepmom, and I picked up the phone and he just started yelling. It just that was how much I had really broken a sacred agreement between parent and child and Korean American culture. Right. How could I go against them? And right. So that was a very, of course, a very painful time, but it, for me, I had no choice. Being an artist, being a documentary filmmaker is a calling. You don't have a choice. If it hurts more to fight against it than to just embrace it. And I had to embrace it. That's who I am. So I got the fellowship, and my proposal was to go to Korea with my dad. I had never been to Korea. My dad had not been back in 35 years, and Korea
Wow.
changed, like hyper modernized in that time. And so I said, okay, I'll drive cross country through the US, see what the US is like, and then I'll go to Korea, live there for 3 months, and then my dad will come and we'll go retrace his childhood path. And um, and then that's what they gave me the award to do, was to make that documentary. And yeah.
That's amazing. I'm pretty sure you had such a wonderful experience. One, being there for the first time, and then number two, just documenting that track of your father. One question, aside from all that documentary, did you happen to visit Lotte World?
Yeah, you got to visit Lotte World.
Yes, loved it, love it. Lotte World is great.
My
It's like
favorite. Yeah.
it's like the Disneyland of South Korea, right?
Yeah, and it's pretty like wackadoodle too. And you're like,
Yeah.
all right, that's cool.
Love Lotte World. Love my time in South
Yeah.
Korea. Again, thank you for all that and sharing. Again, you guys are
Yeah.
watching HBTV, the show with your host, Harry Bugarin, and my special guest, Rosylyn Rhee, documentary filmmaker. So thank you for touching upon some of the challenges that you had to go through early on. And as I told you before, this is an apolitical platform. We don't, I don't usually get too political with things and don't really go in that direction. But just speaking of you throughout this whole time, right? You touched upon some of the challenges. I mean, just with your family alone, and sometimes that can be the toughest. But you being a woman and you being an Asian woman in this industry, um, just take us back, like how that was a little bit, from your experiences. Anything you want to highlight about that, about your experience about that from like mid '90s until the 2020s.
Sure, that is a real thing. So, I graduated 2000. I'd taken a year off. I was class of 99, graduated 2000, and then was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and, bounced around a bit, and then ended up in LA and taking any sort of documentary filmmaking related jobs. So early 2000s, there are hardly any women, definitely no Asian women in the field. And yeah, I mean, I got a lot of flack, definitely. And, I'll just give you a few of the comments and kind of how my sort of mentality about that. So, there's definitely, it's a lot of uh, guys who tend to be white who, I've had everything from, intimidating me kind of physically, at a shoot towards, trying to make fun of me because I have, oh, what's it like shooting with that small camera, to, insulting me because I'm too aggressive about getting my shot. And just all those sort of microaggressions you have to deal with. And yeah, it was, and the few times that I would run into other women, we'd be like, oh my God, isn't that, like, I remember running into one other woman at B&H, and we were talking about the equipment, about how hard it was to get gear correct for our body type.
Right.
Because, I would go to Sammy's and I'd be like, no, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm shooting, editing, everything on my own. And at the time I was shooting in LA County Public School. So
Okay.
I needed everything to be mobile. And they'd be like, here's this 15-pound tripod and a big plastic case, and then this big plastic case for your camera. And I was like, this isn't gonna work. Like, I am a tiny Asian woman. Or, the guy at Sammy's I've had a guy at Sammy's not show me professional level cameras because it had too many buttons.
And I'm sorry, can you tell the audience what B&H and Sammy is actually?
Oh yeah, so B&H is this terrific film video supply store in New York, and Sammy's is a go-to store in LA as well. So if you're looking for equipment, oftentimes B&H has the best prices, and Sammy's has, you know, a lot of salespeople, and sometimes they'll help you, or in my case, sometimes they won't. So, but you know, that just, I think there were two things that I took away from that, is that when I was on a gig and I ran into, because it was mostly other guys who were working, if I ran into a guy who was cool, oh man, I was so grateful, you know. I just, and they were cool. And oftentimes, I wouldn't say this is the rule, but a lot of times they had daughters, you know, and so they just had this very cool relationship of giving me tips, you know, and we would just talk shop. There was no need to try to, you know, the microaggression to try to put me down or to stop what I was doing or to sabotage my, you know, my shot. It was just all like, let me help you. And oh man, I was just, I don't think they knew how rare that was at the time when I ran into that. The other thing is, Naomi Osaka just tweeted about this because, you know, she just won the US Open, and over her face mask, she had the names of, I believe, Black men who had been killed by police. And she got a lot of flack about that, you know. And after she won, her tweet was something like, I just want all of you to know that, you know, for all of you criticizing me for taking a political stance, you just made me angrier and more determined to win. So I definitely felt like that. Like every time there was some guy who would, you know, tell me I was shooting wrong or I shouldn't be shooting, blah, 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 blah. You know, I just, it infuriated me. And I think that was good. Like that anger just made me want to succeed that much more.
Right, and we got somebody on the live chat right now, Mr. Derek Matoyer, and he was just commenting about, well, I'd like to hear more about that physical microaggression sometime, but you know, we don't have to go into it today. But you know, he works on set a lot, and he's never seen that, and he just says that's garbage. You should have never had to deal with that. But
Thank you.
Apologize for all of that. But I hope over the years and through your experience, it has gotten better. You know what I mean? And you have seen more women on the scene, on the sets, and doing their thing. Just, you know, not just a documentary filmmaker, director, person behind the camera, whatever. I hope, you know, more women are doing that in your experience and seeing that, and you have that, you know, that little group, that little network that you guys can connect with. And that's great to those guys. I don't know if you remember their names, but that's great to those guys that were able to, you know, just give you some nuggets, some golden nuggets on how to, where to, and when to. They were speaking to you as a colleague, as a fellow filmmaker, and that's what it's supposed to be all about, right? You know, we're all one people under that sky. As I always say, I have it on the shirt, one tribe. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
I actually do want to shout out to two guys. My son is banging on the door, so I may need a minute, but I think it'll be okay. We'll see how cray he gets.
Let the future filmmaker in. We
okay,
you know, it's all
on.
good. If you gotta go
he's
get
gonna
him.
see the light, and he may lose it because he hasn't seen all my studio.
Yeah,
Okay.
let him in. It's all
All right,
good.
let's see what happens. Let's see what happens.
Let's do it. Let's document this too, where it is actually. Again, everybody, you guys are watching Hbtv, the show with your host Harry Bugarin and our special guest, Rosylyn Rhee, documentary filmmaker. Is little man coming in?
Okay, yeah, he ran away. I think it was just a moment.
It was just a moment. Okay, well, thank you for all that, Rosylyn. Really quick, you know, with the minutes that we have, I just want to touch upon, you know, what type of message, what type of advice would you give someone, you know, young woman, young man coming into this industry, wanting to get into film, especially documentary filmmaking? Like, what message would you like to give her or him?
Yeah. So I think the only question that really matters in that case is, do you really want to make a documentary? And I don't mean that like, do you have what it takes? You know, I mean that, you know, like I mean that. You know,
That was
like,
really cool, by the way.
Well, you mean, you know, you run into that a lot, but I mean that sincerely. Like, do you really want to make a documentary? And if you do, then make it. it's because it's a lot of work, and it's a job just like any other job. It's a career, it's a profession. So I think there's this often a misconception that, um, the life of an artist is this magical, transcendental thing, and yeah, for bare moments there are. And when you're in that process of creation, you do have moments of feeling like, this is out of the world and this is the most amazing feeling. But more often than not, more of your life is just grind. It's just day to day getting up. Okay, today I'm working on this. And it's a lot of work and a lot of tedious work. And I happen to like that tedious work, which is why I am a documentary filmmaker. So I think the only question is, do you really want to do this? And if you do, go for it. And it's a job just like any other job.
Right, right. And as far as your works, I know I'll have your website uh, on the description as well. Um, can they see your work via your website, or is there another place that they can go to?
Sure. So my website has a good selection of the commission work I've done. So that was for about 10 years, I was commissioned by nonprofits to make short documentaries. So if they go to my website, I have a tab that says documentaries, and then I have independent films and then commissioned work. So if they go to commissioned work, a whole bunch of videos will come up there.
Awesome. And what about if somebody wanted to work with you? Is that something you're open to? Do you
Oh
collaborate
yeah,
with people?
totally. So
Like, how would that work?
I think there are a few things. Is that I loved commissioned work. So I love it when people come to the table saying, "Hey, I respect you as a professional, and I'd love to pay you for your time and energy." So, and sometimes what'll happen, so most recently I was commissioned to make a feature with this retired scripts professor, Kitty Marriott, who's amazing. And, making documentaries is very expensive. So a lot of times people will come to me and say, okay, say the costs are A, B, and C. So in Kitty's case, she said, okay, I'll do A and about half of B, and I'll pay you to do the other half of B and C. And that was a way that she could keep down the costs. Like, so she would film a lot of it and then have me film very select parts of it, because it's expensive to have me come out and film. And then because editing just takes a lot of time, that's where she put most of her budget. So, sometimes people will come and say, or they'll say, can you just film this stuff and then we'll edit it. So that's one way for commission work. In terms of if people have ideas, I'm happy to point them to resources. Like if they feel inspired and want to figure out a way to get their vision realized, there's definitely a lot of resources that I would be happy to point them to.
That's awesome. And people can connect with you via email, or do you have
That's a good
Instagram
question.
like that?
Let me think about that. I realize, because I'm not on social media. This was a discussion, by the way, with Harry and I about, because I'm not like, I'm not on social media. I was like, well, I email people. I'm on LinkedIn. People can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's a definite way. And I'm kind of half and half about putting my email address on my website. I might do that. Or maybe they can go through you.
That's fine. I'm always about trying to connect people, and I do have honestly a couple people that I'd love to connect you with to get the ball rolling on a documentary or different projects as well. Just really quick, going back to the technology, hardware, and software that you use today, right? So as far as that stuff, from your hardware and your software for post. What are you using now? I mean, we talked about your 1990 stuff, but as far as today and now, like, what do you recommend?
So,
Avid
question.
Or Adobe or something like that for your post?
So good question. I think that advice to aspiring documentary filmmakers, I think don't get hung up on the camera so much. I think people get really, worried about getting the most fancy camera. And to remember that your sound is as important as your camera. So get as good of a sound rig as your camera. So if you gotta, cut a little money on your camera, it's fine. If that means you can spend a little bit more money on a good mic, especially if you're in verite observational shooting situations, you need a really good mic to be able to get what you need. And I think documentary filmmaking is also characterized by as much flexibility as possible.
Okay.
So, that's at least what I sought, is to try to find gear that allows you to move as quickly as possible. So every few years I have to buy new equipment just because the video equipment doesn't last as long as film. And personally, I'm not a big gearhead, so I don't love buying equipment. And some people love buying equipment. I find it very stressful, but it's just because of the nature of my work, I have to. I was gonna clean up my office for Harry's interview, but I thought this really is the office of a documentary filmmaker.
There it is. Organic.
Yeah, I got a lot of shelving units, drawers. That's very helpful. The camera I've been working with recently is a Sony FS5.
Okay.
And I thought that was a good mix of a good form factor. It's relatively small. Again, for someone my size, it's still pretty hard running around with a camera all day. And then I've been working with a Sennheiser ME66 shotgun mic, which I think I've had this mic for over 10 years. Mm-hmm. It was expensive, but it's worth it if you get good equipment that lasts long. And the thing is, I think there's this real love for the like mirrorless cameras,
right.
And the photography cameras that shoot video, and absolutely those cameras shoot unparalleled footage in low lighting, which
Wow.
is huge because you're in low lighting situations, that's kind of like the reality and a big challenge of documentary filmmaking. But it's really hard to get a good mic setup with those cameras. So what you end up having to do is Frankenstein those cameras in order to be able to get a good audio signal. So
right.
You may have a small camera, but then you've got this huge rig around it to try and make it. So at that point, you've lost another thing that for me as a documentary filmmaker I like, which is having a small footprint, not having a big presence in the room, because you're really gonna impact the vibe,
right.
And you want to be as invisible as possible, which is harder these days. So I felt like the Sony FS5 was a good mix of, it's pretty good in low lighting. Lenses, if I invest in lenses, I could do better with low lighting. And then I also had a good solid audio line.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Rosie. That pretty much wraps up our time. I just wanted to ask you, is there anything else off the top of your head that you want to, tell our viewers, shout outs or anything else?
Sure. I would just like to shout out to my working moms who are working and also dealing with their children banging on their door. You guys are super women.
Yes. Awesome. Well, Rosie, thank you for your time. I do
you.
appreciate it. Always a blessing to have great people like you on the show who tell inspiring stories and help influence, those future filmmakers out there. Would love to have you on a future show, if that's okay with you, and just to check in with you and to see how things go. Okay?
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Well, Rosie, you have a blessed and safe rest of your weekend and a blessed work week. I'll check in with you again later, and you have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was our special guest, Rosie. She was great, learned a lot about what it takes. Looking forward to touch base with her again with any future projects that she has in the future. So again, thank you guys for sticking with me and just watching this episode of the second season of the Hbtv, the show. It's been great. We have more guests coming on. Every Sunday we're going to be live at 6 p.m. Unless otherwise, some of the guests can't make it at 6 p.m. But usually at 6 p.m. we're going to go live with Hbtv, the show. And again, as promised, after the show, later on Instagram, earlier this week, I was giving away some snapback hats. If you guys haven't liked the post yet and made your comment, please do make your comment and like the post, share it. A little bit after the show, I'm going to go ahead and randomize the lucky winner of one of 4 snapbacks that I'm giving out. This is that gray one. This is cool. We have another one. I think we have one of these guys, and a camo as well. But we'll let you guys know who the lucky winner is, and thank you guys for liking and supporting and sharing. You guys will have, whoever the winner is, you will have 2 days to respond with the comment of which hat you would like. So again, thank you guys for sticking around and joining me on the show. I'll see you guys next week at 6 p.m. on Hbtv, the show. Your host, Harry Bugarin. You guys have a great day.